Greetings and welcome back to Lemex Effects. Alright, we're going to talk about Final Fantasy X once again, and this time we're going to speak about the Al Bhed. Why? Because I want to take things in order. What I mean by in order is, some of you may have seen my video explaining that Zanarkand is Jerusalem, and it would make sense to, after that, explain why Sin destroyed Zanarkand. But instead, I want to speak about the Al Bhed because after Tidus was transported from Zanarkand to Spira, he met the Al Bhed. Not much is known about the Al Bhed at that point in the game, so we can only discuss what we have based on the information we're given. Once we do this, we'll understand how to craft characters and group relations for our own stories. Okay, the first thing we want to examine when examining the Al Bhed is the name Al Bhed. Al Bhed comes from the words alpha, beta, meaning the alphabet. With that said, not every language has an alphabet. For example, the Japanese have syllabary, meaning the Japanese syllable sounds that are in the Japanese language. Alpha beta literally comes from the Greek letters alpha, beta, meaning A and B. So since not every language has Greek letters, they don't have the alphabet. So by saying that these are the Al Bhed, that means we're calling them Greek. So that would mean that the Al Bhed are the Greeks in the New Testament. Now, here's where the hidden messages of the game comes in. Riku once asked Tidus,
"We're Al Bhed, can't you tell?" "Wait, you're not an Al Bhed hater, are you?"
And he responds,
"I don't even know what an Al Bhed is."
Now, why is that important? It's important because if you look back at the scene in Zanarkand when Tidus was hanging with all his fans, you would see an Al Bhed character right here. Now, people who have played Final Fantasy X know that the Al Bhed are characterized by heavy leather clothing for work with machines and some sorts of covering to cover their green eyes. So this woman would be obviously to us an Al Bhed. But if that is so, why did Tidus say he had never seen one or heard of one? Well, Riku does explain.
Yeah, there is no Zanarkand anymore. Sin destroyed it 1,000 years ago.
That would mean that 1,000 years ago when Tidus was there, they were not called Al Bhed. Now, normally I would pull out some scriptures that would prove or connect the Al Bhed to the Greeks by using some sort of correlation. However, since we do not know much about the Al Bhed at this point of the game, instead we will focus on the concept of hidden messages and how the Bible used them in the same way. You see, we know that the Al Bhed were in Zanarkand, but only because we saw Zanarkand, therefore we know about it. Why is that important? Well, according to the video I have showing that Zanarkand represented heaven, we would know that the Al Bhed had to be the same race as Tidus to be in the same country as him. Also, that video showed that Zanarkand represented Jerusalem and the people who lived there represented Israel. So, if the Al Bhed were in Zanarkand, then they were native to Israel. And they became Al Bhed later, so they were Greeks. Basically, the Al Bhed were Israelites who became Greeks. This would help you to understand something like Paul's writings better, because he would write things in code to hide messages from the Romans. He would say something like in Romans chapter 9, verse 24, "Even us, whom he hath called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles, as he saith also in Hosea, I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not beloved." Now, you would read that and think Paul was talking about everyone, right? All Gentiles. And why would you think that? Because you don't know what Paul knows. You weren't raised in the same way Paul was raised, so you don't make the same connections that Paul was making. You see, when he was saying Gentiles, he said specifically, as he also says in Hosea, meaning his explanation for who the Gentiles are is in Hosea. So someone raised reading and believing the Old Testament would understand that. So let's get it. Hosea chapter 1 verse 9. Then said God, Call his name Lo-Ami, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. So, here is where it says that someone was not God's people, which we know because of Romans are the Gentiles, yes? So, let's let the next verse explain who the Gentiles are. Verse 10, Hosea chapter 1, verse 10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, then it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. So the scripture in Hosea chapter 1 verses 9 and 10 explains that the Gentiles in Romans 9 are the people who are from Israel. But Paul did not elaborate on that. So a reader would need to know the Old Testament to make that connection. Now, the same way the Gentiles or Greeks are from Israel, the same way the Albed are people who are from Zanarkand. Therefore, they are Jews who are called Greek. But you need to have paid attention to the game's characters and to know the Bible to make that connection. Now, as a writer, how would you use this? I'd have to, let's say, make a set of characters who were separated from their homeland. So much separated that they called themselves by a descriptor rather than their home country. For example, the Albed don't call themselves Zanarkadians. They call themselves Albed. Why? Because they speak Greek or they speak Albed. Similarly, the Greeks in the Bible don't call themselves Israelites. They call themselves Greek because they speak Greek. A real life example of something like that would be, I don't know, like how the Aztecs and Mayans are called Hispanic because they speak Spanish. Some other story examples would be like the Faunus and Ruby because they look like part animal people like the fauns in mythology. There are also demi-humans in Rising of the Shield Hero. They look part human, part animal, so they're called demi-human or half-human. The mutants in X-Men are not called by the country they're from. They're called mutant because of their mutated abilities. Like they're not called by, none of them are called by any country. They're called by some character trait that describes them. That's basically called a byword, but we're not going to touch on that just yet. We'll touch on the word byword when we get to sin. So let's say that you want to hide your messages the same way Paul did. Maybe you're making a biblical game, but you want people who don't believe in the Bible to still want to play it. Well, if you want to hide your messages the way Paul did, then you'd have to change the names of the people, of the characters, so that people wouldn't know that it's biblical. Or perhaps your game is political. Then you'd have to change it so that others couldn't connect your character to any sort of group or demographic. Now, next week, we will examine the next scene, where Waka gives some history on sin. We're not going to talk about byword yet. We're going to talk about that when we get to the Albed again. But we will examine sin. Now, if you want to see it, like, share, and subscribe. Also, please give a comment on what you think about my explanation, biblical and Final Fantasy, and also give a comment about any games you think I should play and examine, and especially if they're PlayStation 4 games, because I have not other consoles to use. And if you have any questions about Final Fantasy X specifically, or the Bible, also please leave those. And I shall hope to see you next time on Lamex Effects.